Marco Romano is just a fisherman from a small coastal town in Maine. Every morning, he takes his boat out to sea, following the same routine his father and grandfather did before him. But today is different. In the middle of the worst storm of the year, he spots something in the waves. A woman, barely conscious, clutching a piece of wreckage. Around her neck gleams a sapphire necklace, worth millions. Marco saves her life, not knowing that this single act of kindness will plunge him into a world of billionaire secrets, hidden treasures, and international intrigue. The next morning, as his small fishing village wakes up, a massive black submarine surfaces offshore. What deadly secrets does the woman carry? And why are such dangerous people willing to kill to find her? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The Mary's Grace fought against waves that could swallow a house whole. Marco Romano's hands, calloused from 20 years of working the sea, gripped the wheel with practiced strength as another wall of water crashed over the bow. The ancient radar display flickered with each lightning strike, its green glow casting shadows across his weathered face. He should have headed back hours ago. Any sane captain would have. But the traps he'd set yesterday represented a week's worth of income. And with the bank breathing down his neck about the mortgage, he couldn't afford to lose them. "Just 3 more, he muttered, wiping salt spray from his beard. 3 more traps, and we head home." Thunder cracked overhead like artillery fire, and Marco's eyes caught movement in the water that didn't match the storm's rhythm. Something reflective, catching the lightning's flash. He squinted through the spray-covered windshield, years of experience telling him this wasn't just another piece of storm debris. There, a hand breaking the surface, reaching desperately toward the sky. "Mary, Mother of God," Marco whispered, already spinning the wheel hard to port. The boat protested, groaning against the turn, but she was as sturdy as they came. His father had built her 30 years ago, naming her after Marco's mother, and there wasn't a better vessel in the harbor for rough weather. The figure in the water disappeared beneath the waves, then surfaced again, closer now. In the strobing lightning, Marco caught a glimpse of dark hair and pale skin. A woman, clinging to what looked like a piece of fiberglass, maybe from a pleasure craft that hadn't made it through the storm. Marco grabbed his emergency kit and life ring, muscle memory taking over. He'd done rescue training with the Coast Guard Auxiliary for years, though he'd never had to use it in conditions this severe. The woman vanished again under a massive swell. Come on, he urged, scanning the water. The Mary's Grace rocked violently as he cut the engine, not wanting to risk the props so close to a swimmer. Wind howled through the rigging like a banshee's wail. There, 20 feet off the starboard bow, Marco threw the life ring with practiced accuracy, the attached line playing out behind it. The ring landed just beyond the woman, and he saw her grab for it with one hand, the other still clutching her piece of debris. "I've got you!" he shouted, though the wind probably carried his voice away. "Hold on!" He began hauling in the line, every pull a battle against the storm, trying to tear her away. The woman helped as much as she could, kicking weakly, but her movements were becoming sluggish. Hypothermia would be setting in fast in these waters. When she was alongside the boat, Marco could see she wore expensive clothing, or what remained of it. A torn evening dress, completely inappropriate for being at sea. Around her neck glinted something that caught the lightning's flash, but he had no time to study it. Her eyes were starting to close. "Stay with me," he commanded, securing the line and preparing to haul her aboard. Just a little longer. Getting her onto the deck was the hardest part. She was dead weight now, barely conscious, and the boat's violent motion made every movement treacherous. Marco finally managed it, immediately wrapping her in the emergency blankets from his kit. Her skin was ice cold, lips tinged blue. That's when he got his first good look at what she wore around her neck. Even encrusted with salt, there was no mistaking the tennis ball-sized sapphire surrounded by diamonds. Marco had seen it before in a newspaper article about the reclusive billionaire Jonathan Drake and his famous family jewelry collection. The woman's eyes fluttered open briefly, revealing striking green irises. She tried to speak, but only managed a whisper, "They're coming." Then her eyes rolled back, and she went limp in his arms. Marco glanced at the storm-dark horizon, a chill running down his spine that had nothing to do with the weather. Something told him his life was about to become considerably more complicated than overdue bank payments and storm-scattered lobster traps. He fired up the engine and pointed the Mary's Grace toward home, pushing her as fast as he dared through the mountainous seas. The woman needed medical attention, and fast. But as lightning illuminated the waves around them, Marco couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. In his arms, the woman clutched something besides the piece of wreckage she'd been holding, a metal case, small but heavy, secured to her wrist with what looked like a titanium chain. Marco had pulled enough strange things from the sea over the years to know when something wasn't right, and everything about this situation was setting off alarm bells. The storm raged on, but Marco barely noticed it now, his mind racing with questions. Who was she? What was she doing out here? And most importantly, who were they? And why were they coming? He didn't know it yet, but by sunrise he'd start getting answers, though they wouldn't be the ones he was expecting, and they'd come at a price that would change his life forever. The Port Haven Medical Clinic wasn't much. Just a converted Victorian house with a fresh coat of paint and a small emergency room addition. But at 3 in the morning, with rain still hammering the coast, it was the best option Marco had. Dr. Sarah Chen met them at the door, her black hair pulled back in a hasty ponytail. She'd been the town's primary physician for 5 years, ever since choosing the quiet coastal life over a prestigious Boston hospital position. One look at the unconscious woman in Marco's arms, and her casual demeanor vanished. "Treatment room." "One," she ordered, already checking vital signs as they moved. "What happened?" "Found her in the storm. She was conscious briefly, but..." Marco helped transfer the woman to an examination bed. "How bad?" Sarah's fingers moved with practiced efficiency, checking pulse, pupils, temperature. "Severe hypothermia, possible concussion, multiple lacerations." "How long was she in the water?" "No way to know. 20 minutes minimum before I spotted her." The woman stirred slightly as Sarah cut away the remains of the evening dress. The sapphire necklace caught the harsh medical lighting, and Sarah's eyes widened. "Marco, is that—" "Yeah." He ran a hand through his salt-crusted hair. "And that's not the only strange thing." He nodded toward the metal case still chained to the woman's wrist. "Can't find any way to remove it." Sarah examined the chain. "This is military-grade equipment. What was she doing out there?" Before Marco could answer, the woman's eyes snapped open. She sat up with surprising strength, looking wildly around the room. Both Marco and Sarah stepped back, startled by the sudden movement. "You're safe," Marco said quickly. "I pulled you from the water. You're at a medical clinic." The woman's green eyes focused on him, then darted to the windows, the door, back to him. Her hand went to her throat, relaxing slightly when she felt the necklace still there. When she spoke, her voice was hoarse but cultured. Where am I?" "Port Haven, Maine," Sarah answered, moving slowly closer. "I'm Dr. Chen. Can you tell us your name?" The woman's brow furrowed. She touched her temple, wincing. I'm not..." Fear flashed across her face. "I can't remember." Marco and Sarah exchanged glances. The woman noticed, her expression hardening. "You don't believe me." "We're trying to help," Sarah said gently. "That necklace you're wearing, it's quite famous. It belongs to..." "I know it's valuable," the woman interrupted. "I know that much. And I know people are looking for it. For me..." She looked at the case attached to her wrist. "This is important too, but I don't..." She pressed her hands to her temples. "It's all fragments." Sarah began a more thorough examination while Marco watched from near the door. The woman answered medical questions automatically, but claimed no memory of personal details. The only thing she offered was a name, Victoria, though she wasn't sure if it was hers. A sharp gust rattled the windows, making them all jump. Marco moved to look outside, and something caught his eye. A black SUV parked across the street, its windows tinted despite the darkness. As he watched, it pulled away silently. "We need to call the police," Sarah said, finishing her examination. Victoria grabbed her arm. No authorities." Her voice was firm despite her condition. "Please, I don't know why, but I know that would be dangerous. There are protocols for situations like this," Sarah argued. "Missing persons? Someone just left in a hurry," Marco interrupted. "Black SUV, no lights, didn't like the look of it." Victoria's face went even paler. "They're already here." Marco moved away from the window. "Who's already here?" "I don't." Victoria struggled visibly with her fragmented memories. "There's a safe place. Numbers, coordinates." She looked at the case on her wrist. "In here, but I can't remember the sequence." Sarah prepared an IV. "You need rest. Whatever's going on, it can wait until—" "It can't wait," Victoria insisted. "They'll come at dawn. They always come at dawn." Her voice trailed off as the sedative Sarah had added to the IV took effect. Marco studied her face as she slept. In the harsh medical lighting, he could see fine scars on her hands. Not the kind you got from accidents. They looked more like the marks his SEAL buddy Mike had from years of weapons training. "This is way above our pay grade," Sarah said quietly, checking Victoria's vitals one more time. Marco nodded toward the case. "Take a look at this." They examined the metal box together. It was smaller than a laptop, but heavy for its size. The chain connecting it to Victoria's wrist looked simple, but proved impossible to unfasten. Strange. Markings were etched into the case's surface, circles and lines that almost formed letters, but not in any alphabet Marco recognized. "Hold on," Sarah said, tilting the case under the light. "These markings, they match the engravings on the necklace." She was right. The same circular patterns decorated the sapphire's setting. Marco took a closer look and noticed something else. Tiny numbers, barely visible, worked into the design. "Coordinates," he muttered. She said something about coordinates. A sound from outside made them both turn, the distant throb of powerful engines somewhere out on the water. Marco went to the window again, and his heart nearly stopped. The storm had blown itself out, and dawn was just starting to paint the horizon. There, surfacing less than a mile offshore, was a massive black shape that could only be a submarine. Sarah joined him at the window. "Tell me that's one of ours." Marco had spent enough time around Navy vessels to know better. No US sub would surface that close to shore. Not like that. He turned back to Victoria's sleeping form. "Whatever's going on, we're in it now." Thunder rumbled one last time, like a warning of things to come. In a few hours, the quiet fishing village of Port Haven would never be the same, and Marco Romano's simple life was about to become anything but. Dawn painted Port Haven in shades of grey and gold, the storm's aftermath leaving everything looking scrubbed clean. But the picturesque morning was shattered by the massive black shape sitting half a mile offshore, a submarine unlike anything Marco had ever seen. "Military?" Sarah asked, handing him a cup of coffee as they watched from the clinic's second-floor window. "No markings I recognize." Marco studied the vessel through borrowed binoculars. "Hull designs all wrong for US Navy. Too sleek." A flurry of activity near the harbor caught his attention. 3 identical black SUVs pulled up to the dockmaster's office. Men in dark suits emerged, moving with the kind of precision that screamed professional training. "Company's here," Marco muttered. Victoria stirred on her bed behind them. The sedative was wearing off, and her sleep had grown restless. The metal case clinked against the bed rail as she moved. Sarah's ancient computer chirped, making them both jump. A message window had popped up on the screen. "Incoming transmission. Secure channel activated." "That's not possible," Sarah said, moving to the keyboard. "This computer barely handles email." The screen flickered, and a man's face appeared. He was in his 60s, distinguished-looking, with steel-grey hair and eyes that seemed to pierce through. The camera, Marco recognized him immediately from news photos. Jonathan Drake, the reclusive tech billionaire. "Dr. Chen," Drake said without preamble, "Mr. Romano, we need to talk about my daughter." Marco and Sarah exchanged shocked looks. On the bed, Victoria's eyes opened. "Your daughter?" Sarah managed. "The woman you pulled from the sea, Mr. Romano. Though she's currently using the name Victoria Reed, her real name is Alexandra Drake. And that submarine out there? It's not here to rescue her. Quite the opposite." Victoria, or Alexandra, sat up slowly, her face a mask of confusion. "I don't remember." "You're not supposed to, my dear," Drake said, his voice softening. "The memory block was a security measure. Your idea, actually." A commotion erupted from downstairs. Voices, heavy footsteps. Sarah moved to check the security camera feed. "We've got company. 6 men, armed, coming up." "Not my people," Drake said sharply. "Listen carefully, there's a third faction involved. They're after the quantum encryption key Alexandra was transporting. That case on her wrist, it contains technology that could reshape global communications or destroy them." Victoria touched the case, recognition flickering in her eyes. "The Project Oracle." "Yes. You were trying to get it to the secure facility when they intercepted you." Drake's image crackled with interference. "The necklace contains part of the decryption sequence. The case holds..." The screen went black. From below came the sound of a door being forced open. "Backstairs," Sarah said, already moving. "Through the old servants' passage. Leads to the alley." Marco helped Victoria to her feet. She was steadier. Now, her movements becoming more fluid, more purposeful. "The case," she said. "We can't let them have it." They slipped into the narrow passage, just as boots thundered up the main stairs. Sarah led them down the tight spiral staircase, there, waylit only by her phone's flashlight. Behind them, angry voices echoed through the walls. They emerged into the alley behind the clinic. The morning fog still clung to the ground, providing some cover. Marco oriented himself quickly. The harbour was 3 blocks east, but that's where the SUVs were. West led to the old cannery district. "This way," he said, leading them toward the abandoned buildings. A shout went up behind them. Gunfire cracked against the brick wall, sending chips flying. Victoria stumbled, but her movements were different now, more controlled, professional. She pulled Sarah and Marco into a doorway's shelter. "Memories!" "Oh, coming back," she said grimly. "Not all of it, but I know what I'm doing. Follow my lead." She led them through a maze of alleys and loading docks, moving with practiced efficiency. More gunshots rang out, but their pursuers were shooting blind now. The fog was their ally. They ended up in the old O'Malley Cannery building. Victoria moved straight to a rusty freight elevator, examining the control panel. Her fingers found hidden catches, and the panel swung open to reveal a modern keypad. "Emergency fallback site," she explained, punching in a code. "Part of a network my father established." She paused, blinking. "I remember that now. He's really my father." The elevator rumbled to life, descending past the marked floors into hidden depths. When the doors opened, they found themselves in a high-tech facility that had no business existing beneath an abandoned cannery in Maine. "Safe room," Victoria said, moving to a computer terminal. "Temporarily at least. They'll find it eventually, but it gives us time." Sarah checked Victoria's vital signs, while Marco watched the security feeds. Their pursuers were sweeping the cannery district methodically. On another screen, he could see the submarine had launched smaller vessels. "Your father?" Marco said. "Can we trust him?" Victoria's hands moved across the keyboard. "Yes, no, I don't." She pressed her temples in frustration. "There are gaps, but I know this facility, know its purpose." She looked at the case on her wrist. "Project Oracle. It's not just encryption. It's something else. Something bigger." The computer screens suddenly filled with sonar data. Complex patterns of sound waves rippling out from the submarine. Victoria studied them intently, They're mapping something, she said, using frequencies that penetrate the seabed, looking for... Her voice trailed off as her eyes widened. Oh God, I remember. The real facility. It's not here, it's out there, under the water, and they're going to find it. A different alarm began to sound. On the security feeds, their pursuers had found something. Blueprints, maps, something that made them move with new purpose. How long until they find us? Sarah asked. Victoria checked the feeds. 20 minutes, maybe less. And the submarine? They'll find the underwater site within the hour. She looked at Marco. There's a decision to make. We can run. I've got escape routes mapped, or we can beat them to what they're looking for. Stop this before it goes any further. She touched the sapphire necklace. I know what this is now. It's not just jewelry, it's a key. And combined with this case, she met their eyes. We could end this, but it would mean going out there, under the water. Marco thought of his quiet life, his fishing boat, his routine. Then he thought of the gunfire in the alley, the look in Drake's eyes, the forces converging. On his hometown. The Mary's Grace, he said. She's got sonar, diving gear. Not fancy, but... Victoria nodded slowly. It could work if we're fast, if we're lucky. More alarms. Their pursuers were getting closer. Decision time, Sarah said. Marco looked at the submarine on the monitors, then at the case on Victoria's wrist. Whatever was happening, it had dropped into his life like that first flash of lightning in the storm. And like the storm, there was only one way through it. Tell me what you need, he said to Victoria. She smiled for the first time since he'd pulled her from the sea. First, we need to get back to your boat. Through a small army of professional killers. Just another day in Port Haven, Sarah said dryly. Above them, boots thundered on metal. Catwalks. Time was up, and the real adventure was just beginning. The old Canary's maintenance tunnels ran like veins beneath Port Haven's streets. Victoria led them through the darkness, her movements growing more assured as muscle memory returned. The case clinked softly against her wrist as she consulted a faded blueprint pulled from the facility's files. The town archives said this place shut down in 46, Marco said, keeping his voice low. Never mentioned any tunnels. That's because these weren't for maintenance, Victoria replied. Port Haven was a covert submarine base during World War. The tunnels connected strategic points throughout the town. She traced a line on the blueprint. This one leads to the harbor. Sarah studied the old document. The town records I digitized last year never mentioned any of this. They wouldn't. The official records were altered, but my father... Victoria winced, pressing her temple. He found evidence. That's why he chose this location for... She stumbled, catching herself against the wall. Your memories, Sarah said. They're causing physical stress. Like defragmenting a corrupted hard drive, Victoria managed. Pieces fitting back together, but not smoothly. A distant rumble made them pause. Marco felt it through his feet, something heavy moving above. Then came the distinctive sound of drilling. They're searching systematically, Victoria said. Ground-penetrating radar, seismic sensors. They'll find these tunnels soon. They pressed on, guided by Victoria's returning knowledge and the blueprint's faded lines. The tunnels grew older, changing from mid-century concrete to earlier stone construction. Water dripped somewhere in the darkness. Here, Victoria said finally, stopping at what looked like a blank wall. Her fingers found hidden pressure points, and a section of stone swung inward. Harbor access. The hidden door opened onto a narrow cave that smelled of salt and seaweed. Natural rock gave way to worked stone, then to modern concrete. Ahead, filtered light suggested an exit. They emerged inside a dilapidated boathouse that Marco had passed 1,000 times without a second glance. Through gaps in the weathered. Aboards, they could see the Mary's Grace bobbing at her mooring, and 4 armed men standing guard on the dock. My father's people or theirs, Marco whispered. Victoria studied their stance, their weapons. Neither. Local muscle, hired quick. See how they're watching the street, not the water? Amateurs. A new sound cut through the morning air. Helicopter. Rotors approaching fast. We need those town records, Victoria said, the real ones. There'll be details about the underwater facilities that weren't in my father's files. Sarah nodded. Town hall basement. But it's across the square, past the... The helicopter roared overhead, drowning out her words. Through the boathouse roof they glimpsed a sleek black aircraft that shouldn't have existed outside of military black sites. Split up, Victoria decided. Sarah, the records. Marco, create a distraction for those guards. I need 5 minutes with my boat. Your boat? Marco raised an eyebrow. The one that sank last night. It's down there. She pointed toward the harbour depths. Along with equipment we're going to need. I can retrieve it, but not with an audience. Sarah checked her phone. Town hall security changes shift in 10 minutes. That's our window. What kind of distraction? Marco asked. Victoria's returning memories had brought something else back, a dangerous gleam in her eye. How do you feel about explosions? Before Marco could answer, Sarah's phone buzzed. She checked it, frowning. Email from the State Records Office. They're asking about shipping manifests from 1944, dated 2 minutes ago. They're into the town systems, Victoria said. We need to move, now. The helicopter made another pass. On the dock, one of the guards spoke into a radio. Time was running out. Marco moved to a window, studying angles and distances. His years on the water had taught him about timing, about watching patterns. The guards had a routine, even if they didn't realize it. The old fuel tanks, he said, behind the bait shop, full of rainwater now, but the vapor... Victoria nodded, approvingly. Controlled demolition, big noise, minimal damage. It'll draw attention, give us our windows. She reached into her dress, wincing, and extracted a small device. Thought I still had one. Timer, remote detonator, shaped charge, military grade. Just happened to be carrying that while drowning, Sarah asked. Standard equipment for Project Oracle field ops. Victoria managed a small smile, among other things. She handed Marco the device, then suddenly went rigid. Her eyes rolled back, and Sarah barely caught her as she collapsed. Memory cascade, Sarah said, checking vitals. Her brain's processing too much at once. Victoria's eyes snapped open, and she grabbed Marco's arm with surprising strength. The necklace, she gasped. It's not just a key, it's a warning, the project. We thought we were creating something new. But we found something old, hidden in the quantum fabric of reality itself. Found what? Marco asked, but Victoria's eyes had glazed again. When she spoke, her voice was distant, reciting, in the deep places, in the spaces between moments, they left messages, equations, gates. She focused suddenly on Marco. We have to stop them. If they decode it fully, if they open what we found... The helicopter was coming around again. On the dock, the guards were spreading out, becoming more alert. Decision time. Sarah helped Victoria to her feet. Records office. 5 minutes, then rendezvous at the boat. Marco gripped the detonator. Watch for my signal. And Victoria? She met his eyes. Try not to drown again. Twice in 24 hours. Would be overdoing it. She managed a shaky smile. The things in the deep are already awake, Mr. Romano. Drowning might be the least of our worries. They split up, each to their tasks. As Marco worked his way toward the fuel tanks, he tried not to think about Victoria's words, but he could feel it now. Something vast and cold, stirring beneath the familiar waters of his home. The morning fog seemed thicker suddenly, and in its coiling tendrils he could almost see patterns, almost see meaning. Time to make some noise. Time to remind himself that sometimes the strangest waters still held simple truths. Cause and effect, action and reaction. He armed the detonator. Whatever lay in the deep could wait. Right now he had a job to do, and he was still just a fisherman from Port Haven, even if nothing would ever be simple again. The explosion rocked Port Haven like a thunderclap. Marco watched from behind the bait shop as his distraction worked perfectly, the guards abandoning their posts to investigate the billowing smoke. In the confusion, he glimpsed Victoria slipping. into the water, sleek as a seal, the metal case somehow not weighing her down. His radio, an old piece of marine equipment Victoria had pulled from the hidden facility, crackled to life. "We've got company at Town Hall," Sarah's voice came through, tense but controlled. Man in a suit, showing federal credentials, calling himself Agent Phillips. Marco started moving toward Town Hall, keeping to the shadows. "FBI? Says he is. But something's off. He's asking about shipping manifests from specific dates in 1944, same dates as that suspicious email. Trap." Victoria's voice cut in, slightly breathless from her dive. "Phillips isn't FBI. He's Drake Industries' head of security, or was, until 3 weeks ago when he disappeared with critical Project Oracle data." A sleek black SUV pulled up to Town Hall's entrance. 2 more suited men emerged, moving with military precision. "Sarah, get out of there," Marco warned. "Can't. Already got what we need, but they're blocking the main exit. In the records room." Victoria surfaced near the Mary's Grace, pulling herself onto the dock with practiced ease. She was holding something, a waterproof tablet, its screen glowing with strange symbols. "Sarah, look for a metal filing cabinet," Victoria instructed. 1944 section. Pull it away from the wall." A moment of silence. Then Sarah's whispered reply. "Found it. There's a door. World War II escape route. Leads to the harbor. Tunnels. Hurry." Marco reached the town hall's rear entrance just as shouting erupted from inside. Gunshots followed, suppressed weapons, barely louder than handclaps, then running footsteps. Sarah burst from a hidden door in the building's foundation, clutching a stack of waterlogged papers. Behind her, voices echoed in the tunnel. "Move!" Marco grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the harbor. More shots sparked off the bricks around them. Victoria was waiting at the Mary's Grace, the engines already rumbling to life. She fired 2 precise shots over their pursuers' heads, warning and distraction combined. They made it to the boat as the helicopter reappeared, banking sharply toward them. Victoria shoved the waterproof tablet into Sarah's hands. "Get us out of here," she ordered Marco, taking up a defensive position. "They can't risk damaging the necklace or the case, but they'll try to disable the boat." Marco guided the Mary's Grace away from the dock, pushing her engines harder than he'd ever dared. Behind them, the helicopter opened fire. Careful shots, aiming for the motor. "Northeast!" Victoria called over the gunfire. "Toward Mitchell's Point. There's a hidden inlet." Sarah was studying the tablet, her eyes wide. "These readings, they're from your sunken boat. Data core survived. Shows what we found last night before they attacked." Victoria ducked as bullets whined overhead. "We thought Project Oracle was just quantum encryption, but the equations kept pointing to something else, something hidden in the fabric of space-time itself." The helicopter was gaining on them. Marco pushed the throttle further, silently apologizing to his boat. "The numbers," Sarah said suddenly. "In these equations, they match patterns in the old shipping manifests. The Nazi submarines weren't just hiding here. They were searching for something." Victoria nodded grimly. "And they found it, but they couldn't control it. So they buried it, left warnings in code." She touched the sapphire necklace. "Like this. It's not just jewelry. It's a key, yes, but it's also a warning." The helicopter pilot was good, maintaining perfect position despite the choppy seas. On the tablet's sonar display, something huge moved beneath them. "Submarines on the move," Marco reported. "No," Victoria said softly. "That's not the submarine." The sea around them went suddenly, impossibly calm. The helicopter's rotor wash carved circles in the glassy surface. And beneath that surface, patterns of light began to swirl, geometric shapes that hurt the eyes to look at. Sarah grabbed Marco's arm. "The manifest! There's a phrase that keeps repeating in the margins. In German." She swallowed hard. "Das Tor! The gate!" Victoria's face had gone pale. "Phillips found the activation codes. He's trying to open it. We have to—" The helicopter's gun spoke again, but this time a shot found its mark. The Mary's Grace's engine coughed, sputtered, died. They drifted to a stop in the center of the geometric light show. The helicopter kept its distance now, as if afraid to get too close to whatever was happening beneath them. "Give me the tablet," Victoria demanded. Sarah handed it over, and Victoria's fingers flew across the screen. "If I can decode the warning in time." Marco saw movement on the water. Fast boats approaching from multiple directions. The submarine's dark shape surfacing behind them. They were surrounded. A voice boomed across the water from the helicopter's speakers. "Dr. Drake, the necklace and the case. Now, or we start killing. Your friends." Victoria didn't look up from the tablet. "That's Phillips. He doesn't understand what he's doing. The Nazis didn't bury their discovery to hide it. They buried it to save themselves." The geometric patterns under the boat were moving faster now, forming impossible shapes. Marco felt reality itself growing thin around them, like tissue paper, about to tear. "Victoria," he said quietly, "what exactly did Project Oracle find?" She met his eyes, and in them he saw fear, not of Phillips, not of the guns aimed at them, but of something far older and colder. "We found proof," she whispered, "that we're not the first advanced civilization to exist on Earth, not by a long shot. And we found their technology, their doors." She looked down at the swirling patterns, their ways of crossing between spaces that were never meant to touch. The first of the fast boats reached them. Armed men trained weapons on their position. The submarine's deck guns swung ponderously in their direction. "Time to choose," Phillips called. "The necklace and case or your friends die. 5 seconds." Victoria's fingers danced across the tablet. "The warning. It's not about how to seal the gate." Her eyes widened. "It's about what comes through. If you don't." The sea began to boil around them, and in the depths something vast and angular and utterly wrong began to rise. 4 seconds, Phillips called. Sarah gripped Marco's hand. Victoria looked at them both, decision crystallizing in her eyes. "Do you trust me?" she asked. Marco thought of the storm, of pulling her from the waves, of how his simple life had shattered into this impossible moment. "Yes," he said. Victoria nodded once, then she took the necklace from her throat, held it high. "You want this, Phillips?" she called. "Come and get it," and she threw it into the boiling sea. Phillips's enraged scream cut off as the sapphire necklace hit the water. The geometric patterns beneath the Mary's Grace flared blindingly bright, then collapsed inward like a dying star. The sudden vacuum pulled at them, threatening to drag the boat under. "Hold on!" Victoria shouted, her fingers still dancing across the tablet. The case on her wrist hummed with energy, its strange markings beginning to glow with the same impossible light that filled the sea. Marco grabbed the wheel, fighting to keep them stable, as reality twisted around them. The armed boats surrounding them began to back away, their crews clearly unnerved by what they were witnessing. "The necklace!" Sarah gasped, clinging to the gunwale. "Why?" "Because it's not destroyed," Victoria answered, never looking up from the tablet. "It's exactly where it needs to be. The Nazis didn't just find a gate, they found a control system. The necklace isn't a key, it's a coordinate marker." The submarine's deck gun fired, but the shell detonated harmlessly against some invisible barrier that had formed around their boat. Phillips was screaming orders through the helicopter's speakers, his composure shattered. "Your father," Marco said, wrestling with the wheel. "He knew about this. He suspected. Project Oracle was supposed to be about quantum encryption, but the deeper we got into the math..." Victoria's voice trailed off as new data filled the tablet's screen. The equations kept showing us something else. Patterns in the quantum fabric of reality itself. Like fingerprints left by something that was here long before us. The sea around them had become a whirlpool of light, but at its center, absolute darkness was gathering. The armed boats were retreating at full speed now. Even the submarine was backing away. Sarah moved to look at the tablet, her scientific curiosity overcoming her fear. "These readings, they're similar to the old Nazi documents, but they were never trying to build a gate, were they?" "No." Victoria's expression was grim. "They found one. And something came through, something that convinced them to bury it all, hide the evidence and pray it would never be found again. The darkness beneath them was taking shape, angular geometries that shouldn't exist in three-dimensional space. Marco felt a pressure building in his head, like the weight of the deep had followed that darkness up from the abyss. "There," Victoria said suddenly, "the old base, the real one." Through the crystalline water they could see it, a massive structure of concrete and steel built into the underwater cliffs, Nazi engineering decades ahead of its time, and within it, lights were beginning to flicker to life. "Phillips thinks Project Oracle is about quantum computing," Victoria continued, the case on her wrist pulsing in sync with the lights below. "But the quantum effects we discovered, they're not a new technology. They're echoes. Remnants of something far older." The tablet showed sonar images of the underwater base. Massive doors were opening in its side, revealing dark chambers that had been sealed since 1944. "The necklace is down there now," Victoria said. "Its quantum signature will draw them straight to the gate. And the case," she held up her wrist. "This isn't just an encryption key. It's a beacon, a warning system built with technology we barely understand, designed to activate when the gate starts to open." "Draw who to the gate?" Marco asked, though part of him didn't want to know the answer. Before Victoria could respond, a new sound cut through the chaos, a deep, resonant tone that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The geometric patterns in the water began to shift, forming new configurations that hurt the mind to look at. Sarah was studying the Nazi documents, her face pale. The German notes, they call them Die Wächter, the Watchers. They're not trying to come through the gate. They're trying to keep something else from coming through. The darkness below them was moving now, taking on forms that seemed to change every time Marco tried to focus on them. His fisherman's instincts were screaming at him to run, but he held the Mary's Grace steady. "Victoria," he said quietly, "what are we really dealing with here?" She finally looked up from the tablet, and in her eyes he saw the weight of the truth she'd been carrying. "Imagine that reality is like an ocean, and imagine that in its deepest parts there are things that have been sleeping since before humanity existed. The Nazis found one of their ancients' gates and accidentally woke them up. Project Oracle didn't create quantum technology. We discovered the remnants of theirs. The resonant tone was changing, becoming a rhythm that made Marco's teeth ache. On the tablet, energy readings were spiking off the charts. My father, Victoria swallowed hard. He found evidence that this wasn't the only gate. They're scattered across the planet's quantum fabric, hidden in places of power. The Nazis found this one, but there are others. And now, thanks to Phillips's meddling, they're all starting to wake up. The submarine's searchlight caught something moving in the depths, something vast and geometric and utterly alien. The armed boats were nearly at the horizon now. Even the helicopter was backing away. The necklace will lead them to the gate, Victoria said. And the case, it contains codes, commands in their own quantum language. With both, we might be able to seal the gate before... She never finished the sentence. The sea around them exploded upward as something emerged from the depths, a structure of impossible angles and cold light, rising like a mountain of alien geometry. And within it, through gaps in its crystalline surface, they caught glimpses of spaces that couldn't exist, realms where the laws of physics were more like suggestions. It's a waypoint, Sarah whispered, awe overcoming terror, a quantum lighthouse calling them home. The case on Victoria's wrist was vibrating now, its markings blazing with power. She looked at Marco, and he saw both fear and determination in her eyes. We have to go down there, she said, into the old base. It's the only way to reach the gate controls before they fully awaken. Marco looked at the alien structure looming over them, at the Nazi base lurking below, at the impossible task ahead. Then he thought of his town, his home, his simple life that now seemed a lifetime ago. The Mary's Grace has diving gear, he said. Not meant for these depths, but Victoria managed a grim smile. The laws of physics are becoming more flexible. By the minute, Mr. Romano. Right now that's working in our favor. The resonant tone reached a crescendo. In the distance, Phillips's forces could only watch as the fisherman, the doctor and the quantum physicist prepared to dive into history's darkest secrets. Something vast and ancient was stirring in the deep, and only they stood between it and the world above. The Mary's Grace's diving gear had never been meant for something like this. Marco checked the regulators one final time, acutely aware of the alien geometry still rising from the depths. The structure had grown larger, its crystalline surfaces now towering over them like the walls of some impossible cathedral. "The quantum distortions are increasing," Sarah reported, studying the tablet Victoria had handed her. "Normal physics are becoming optional. That's why the diving gear will work," Victoria said, checking the case on her wrist. Its glow had intensified, pulsing in rhythm with the distant resonance. "The gates don't just bridge space. They bend reality around them, water pressure, temperature, even time. Everything becomes fluid." Marco caught her arm as she swayed slightly. "You okay?" "The case." She steadied herself against him. "It's not just responding to the gate. It's changing me. Every time my memories return, I understand more. But..." She met his eyes. "It's like downloading too much data too quickly. Human brains weren't meant to process quantum mathematics." Their faces were close, and for a moment the chaos around them seemed to fade. Marco saw past the quantum physicist, past the brilliant Dr. Drake, to the woman he'd pulled from the storm. Despite everything, or perhaps because of it, something electric sparked between them. A new alarm shattered the moment. Sarah's tablet was flashing red warnings. "Multiple contacts," she reported. "Fast moving." Coming up from the dark shapes erupted from the water around them. Sleek assault craft, matte black and lethal. Professional operators in tactical gear swarmed onto the Mary's Grace before they could react. Within seconds, they were surrounded. "Dr. Drake," a smooth voice called from the nearest craft. "So good to finally meet in person." The speaker stepped into view, a woman in an expensive suit, her silver hair cropped short. Her bearing screamed executive, but her eyes were cold as Arctic ice. "Catherine Mills," Victoria growled. "Quantum Technologies International. Here to steal someone else's research?" "Steal?" Mills smiled. "Your father's the thief, my dear. Project Oracle was meant to be a joint venture, until he found something interesting and decided to keep it for himself." She nodded to her men. "Take the doctor." Two operators grabbed Sarah, who fought with surprising strength before a third managed to subdue her. "Let her go." Marco stepped forward, but multiple weapons tracked his movement. "She'll be perfectly safe," Mills assured them. "Insurance, nothing more. Now, Dr. Drake, let's discuss that case on your wrist. And don't bother with heroics. My teams have Phillips's forces surrounded. No one else is coming to help." Victoria's laugh was bitter. "You think this is about corporate espionage? Look around you. What's happening here is bigger than..." "Oh, I know exactly what's happening." Mills's smile widened. "Why do you think..." "We partnered with Drake Industries in the first place. We've been searching for the gates for decades. The Nazi research was incomplete. But now, thanks to your father's quantum breakthroughs and your convenient field test," she gestured at the crystalline structure towering above them, "we can finally wake them up properly." The resonance from the depths changed pitch, making them all wince. The case on Victoria's wrist flared painfully bright. "You have no idea what you're dealing with," Victoria said through clenched teeth. "Ancient quantum beings, interdimensional entities, the original architects of reality." Mills shrugged. "Call them what you like. Their technology shaped the universe. Imagine what we could learn, what we could become." Sarah was being transferred to one of the assault craft. Marco watched helplessly, his mind racing for options. "The necklace is already down there," Mills continued. "The gate is opening. All we need now is the activation codes in that case. Last chance to surrender it voluntarily." Victoria stepped closer to Marco, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Do you trust me? You already asked me that, he murmured back. This time it's different, because this time... She slipped something small and metallic into his hand. I'm about to do something monumentally stupid. Before he could respond, Victoria raised her voice. You want the case, Catherine? You should know something about the quantum tech you're so eager to steal. She held up her wrist, the case's glow reflecting off the waves. It doesn't just store data. It bonds with the user, becomes part of their quantum signature. Mills's eyes narrowed. Meaning this. Victoria smiled fiercely. Emergency Protocol Alpha Zero. Authorization Drake 719. The case exploded with light. Victoria screamed, a sound of pain and triumph combined, and then she was gone, leaving only a shimmer in the air where she had stood. For a moment, everyone stared at the empty space. Then Mills's calm facade cracked. Find her! She's quantum shifted, but she can't have gone far. Tear this boat apart! Marco closed his fingers around what Victoria had given him, a small quantum data chip warm to the touch. As Mills's operators swarmed around him, he palmed it carefully into his boot. Where is she? Mills demanded, getting in his face. What did she tell you? Marco spread his empty hands. Lady, I'm just a fisherman who picked up a drowning woman. This quantum stuff is way above my pay grade. The resonance from the depths was changing again, taking on harmonics that made reality itself seem to vibrate. The crystalline structure's angles were shifting, opening like the petals of some geometric flower. Mills's tablet chimed. She checked it, her expression darkening. Philip's submarine is moving. They've found something. She turned to her operators. Take him. We'll need dive support anyway. And signal the recovery team. Tell them to start downloading everything from the Nazi base's computers. If she's quantum shifted, she'll have gone somewhere familiar. As rough hands secured him, Marco caught a glimpse of Sarah being transferred to Mills's command boat. His friend met his eyes and gave a slight nod. She was scared, but holding it together. The quantum chip in his boot seemed to pulse once like a heartbeat. Somewhere out there, phased between realities, Victoria was putting her monumentally stupid plan into action. And down in the depths, ancient things were stirring, drawn by the resonance of their own long-lost technology. Mills stepped close to him again. I've read your file, Mr. Romano. Local boy. Simple life, way out of your depth. She smiled coldly. But you're about to help us make history, whether you want to or not. Marco looked at the alien geometry rising from the sea, at the Nazi base lurking below, at the impossible situation he'd been dragged into, and he thought of Victoria's face in that quiet moment before chaos erupted. Lady, he said, you have no idea how deep these waters go. The resonance built to a crescendo, and the sea began to boil with quantum light. The dive was about to begin, ready or not, and somewhere between realities, a woman with impossible knowledge was racing against time to save them all. The quantum-warped waters around the Mary's Grace had turned to liquid crystal, refracting reality like a living kaleidoscope. Marco fought against the disorientation as Mills's men prepped him for the dive. The regulator felt cold against his face, grounding him in the physical world even as that world bent impossibly around them. Incoming transmission, one of the operators announced. It's everywhere. The radios crackled with static, then resolved into a familiar voice, Jonathan Drake. But he sounded different now, broken. Catherine, he said, you need to stop. You don't understand what Victoria is. Mills grabbed a handset. Enlighten me. She's not my daughter. Drake's voice was heavy with guilt. She's one of them. Has been all along. The quantum chip in Marco's boot grew suddenly hot. Around them, the crystalline structure's resonance changed pitch. 20 years ago, Drake continued, something came through a gate we found in Antarctica. Not fully, just a quantum projection. It took human form, became Victoria. We thought we were studying it, but it was studying us. Mills's composure cracked slightly. Impossible. Our scans would have... She rewrote her own quantum signature to match human patterns. Perfect infiltration, perfect understanding of our technology, because it was never ours to begin with. Drake laughed bitterly. Project Oracle wasn't about discovering their tech. It was about them discovering how close we were to accessing it. Marco remembered Victoria's face in that quiet moment on the boat. The humanity he'd seen there, the connection he'd felt. Had it all been a lie? The quantum chip pulsed again, and suddenly he heard her voice in his mind, carried on waves of probability. Trust your instincts, Marco. Truth is more complicated than lies. If she's one of them, Mills demanded, why fight to keep us from the gate? Because she changed, Drake said. 20 years living as human, it affected her. When she learned what her kind once were, what they became, he paused. There's a reason they buried the gates, sealed themselves away, and now we've started breaking those seals. The crystalline structure shuddered. Deep within its geometric art, shadows began to move. She's trying to protect us, Drake finished. God help me, the thing I called daughter for 20 years is trying to save humanity from her own kind. Marco felt the quantum chip grow warmer, and Victoria's voice came again, almost in position. When you see the signal, swim for the Nazi base. The necklace will guide you. Mills was issuing rapid orders, her carefully laid plans dissolving. Get him in the water. If she's quantum shifted, she'll head for the gate. We need to... The sea exploded. Reality fractured as Victoria phased back into normal space directly beneath the crystalline structure. The case on her wrist blazed with power, sending geometric patterns cascading through the quantum-warped water. For a moment, Marco saw her true form, angles and light, and mathematical perfection that hurt his eyes. But in the center of that, quantum geometry, he glimpsed something impossibly human, the soul of a being who had learned to love the flawed, finite creatures she had been sent to study. Now! Her voice rang through his mind. Marco dove. Behind him, chaos erupted as Victoria's quantum powers disrupted Mills's carefully laid plans. Ahead, the Nazi base beckoned through waters that rippled with the death throes of rational physics. The necklace gleamed in the depths, calling him home. The quantum-warped water carried Marco deeper than should have been possible. The Nazi base loomed before him, its massive concrete structure looking ancient and modern at the same time. His depth gauge had stopped working, the numbers spinning randomly as reality continued to break down around him. Sarah's voice crackled through his radio, tense but controlled. I got away from Mills's people in the confusion. Found something in the base's old files, Drake's private journal. Little busy, Marco managed, swimming through what felt like liquid mathematics. Listen to this. Project Oracle was never about encryption. The quantum patterns we discovered weren't random. They were language, instructions left by the architects teaching humanity how to access their technology. But Victoria, Sarah's voice caught. Victoria found something in the patterns, a warning. The architects didn't ascend to some higher plane of existence like we thought. They sealed themselves away, imprisoned themselves, because they knew what they were becoming. Marco reached the base's entrance, a massive airlock that looked more like a bank vault door. The sapphire necklace pulsed somewhere inside, calling to him. They were becoming gods. Victoria's voice cut in, still carrying quantum harmonics that made Marco's teeth ache. But not the kind that create, the kind that consume. My people, we learned to reshape reality itself, and it rashped us, made us hungry for more. The airlock opened at Marco's touch, reality bending around ancient German engineering. The gates weren't for exploration, Victoria continued as Marco swam inside. They were prisons. And the quantum technology wasn't meant to be found. It was meant to keep the prisons sealed. Sarah's voice came again. Marco, the base, it's rigged with quantum-enhanced explosives. The Nazis built a fail-safe in case something came through. If the gate fully opens, everything within 50 miles becomes a quantum dead zone, Victoria finished. No technology would work there. Ever. They were that desperate to keep us contained. Marco reached a junction. In the base, emergency lights still burned, powered by something that predated human understanding of electricity. The necklace's pull was stronger now. "So, why help us?" he asked Victoria. "If your own people are the threat." "Because I learned something." "They never did." Her voice softened, becoming more human. "Living as one of you, feeling what you feel, it changed me. Humanity's flaws, your finite lives, your limited understanding, they're not weaknesses, they're what make you beautiful, what make you real." Sudden movement caught Marco's eye. Phillips and his team had entered the base from another access. A point, they were headed for the gate chamber. "Mills is right behind them," Sarah reported. "They'll reach the gate controls in minutes." "The necklace isn't just coordinates," Victoria said urgently. "It's part of the original quantum lock. With the case's codes, we can reseal the gate, but if they access the control room first..." A new sound cut through the quantum-warped water, a deep resonance that spoke of vast, hungry things stirring in dimensions humanity wasn't meant to perceive. "They're waking up," Victoria whispered. "My people, the ones who couldn't let go of godhood, and they're so hungry." Marco checked his air gauge out of habit, though the numbers meant nothing now. Physics was more of a polite suggestion this deep in the quantum distortion. "Sarah," he said, "how long until the failsafe triggers?" 10 minutes, maybe less." He looked down the corridor where Phillips and Mills raced toward the gate chamber, then up, where Victoria's quantum signature pulsed like a lighthouse in the mathematical storm. Time to choose, time to trust. "Victoria," he said, "I'm going to do something monumentally stupid." He felt her smile across quantum space. "Now you're getting it." Marco Romano, simple fisherman from Port Haven, adjusted his regulator and swam toward the heart of impossibility. Sometimes the only way forward was straight through the storm. The Nazi base's corridors twisted in ways that defied Euclidean geometry, each turn bringing Marco deeper into a maze of quantum impossibilities. The ancient sea charts he'd found in a control room floated beside him, their ink shifting and moving. As reality continued to warp. "The gate chamber is 3 levels down," Sarah's voice crackled through his radio. "But these blueprints, they're not matching what I'm seeing. It's like the base is rebuilding itself." "It is," Victoria confirmed. Her quantum-shifted form flickered at the edge of Marco's vision like heat lightning. "The closer we get to the gate, the more local space-time responds to the original architecture. What you're seeing is the base as it existed in multiple timelines simultaneously." Marco pushed through water that felt thick as honey. "In English, the architects didn't just build in 3 dimensions, or 4. They built in all possible dimensions at once. The Nazis just happened to find one configuration of their work. A distant explosion rocked the base. Phillips's team trying to blast their way through a quantum-sealed door. The sound echoed strangely, repeating in patterns that seemed to hold meaning. "Mills is moving her people to the lower levels," Sarah reported. "They've got some kind of quantum tech I've never seen before. They're walking through walls. Phase shifters." Victoria's voice hardened. "Stolen from my father's lab, crude copies of architect technology, but effective enough to..." She broke off suddenly. "Marco, stop!" He froze. The corridor ahead of him seemed normal enough, but "Look at the charts," Victoria urged. "Really look." Marco studied the shifting ink patterns. The corridors weren't just transforming, they were repeating, looping, like a temporal trap, he realized. The Nazis built recursive time loops into their defense system. Smart man. Victoria's approval warmed him despite the quantum cold water. Step into that corridor, and you'd swim forever, caught in an endless moment. The charts showed another route, maintenance tunnels that ran between the quantum architecture, tight, cramped, but linear, real. "We've got another problem," Sarah cut in. "I've accessed more of Drake's journal. The failsafe device. It's not just rigged to the gate, it's tied into the quantum signature of the base itself. If too many temporal anomalies stack up..." Boom! Victoria finished grimly. The Nazis built it that way on purpose. If something came through that they couldn't control, the failsafe would trigger automatically. Better to destroy everything than let it reach the surface. Marco checked his air supply again out of habit. The gauge still spun uselessly, but he could feel the pressure in his tank getting low. Real-world physics reasserting itself at the worst possible moment. Through the quantum distortions, he caught glimpses of Phillips's team placing charges on another sealed door. Mills's people phasing through nearby walls like ghosts, everyone converging on the gate chamber. "Sarah," he said, "can you override the failsafe?" "Maybe. The controls are in a secondary command center, but I'd need time and a quantum key to access the Nazi systems." "The necklace would work," Victoria offered. "Its quantum signature is pure enough to—" "No," Marco cut her off. "We need the necklace to seal the gate, to stop your people from coming through." "My people," Victoria's voice went distant. "Do you know what it's like, Marco? To remember being virtually a god, to know that you could reshape reality with a thought, and then to choose to be less, to be finite, limited, human." The base shuddered again as Phillips's charges detonated. The quantum distortions rippled outward, making the walls bleed probability. "I don't regret it," Victoria continued softly. 20 years experiencing humanity, feeling joy, pain, love. It taught me more than 10,000 years of near omnipotence. That's why we have to stop them. The ones who never learned that lesson, the ones who are still hungry for godhood. Marco studied the maintenance tunnel entrance, barely wide enough for him with his gear on, no room for error. "Sarah," he said, "get to the failsafe controls. Buy us what time you can." He took a deep breath. "Victoria, I'm going to need a favor, something monumentally stupid." Her quantum form solidified slightly, and he caught a glimpse of her smile. "Those are becoming your specialty. Can you phase me through the maintenance tunnel? Get me to the gate chamber before them? It would expose you to pure quantum flux. The human mind isn't meant to—" "Will it work?" She was silent for a moment. "Yes, but Marco, it will change you, show you things you can't unsee," he thought. Of his simple life, now forever altered, of the cosmic horror awakening in the deep, of the woman who chose humanity over godhood. "Good," he said, "because we're going to need every advantage we can get." Victoria's quantum field enveloped him like a second skin. Reality began to dissolve, and in the spaces between moments, Marco Romano prepared to dive deeper than any fisherman had gone before. Quantum phasing felt like being turned inside out while remaining perfectly still. Marco's consciousness scattered across multiple probability states as Victoria's power pulled him through the maintenance tunnel's solid matter, through the geometric and chaos. He glimpsed realities that shouldn't exist, versions of history where the Nazis had succeeded, where the architects had never left, where humanity had never evolved at all. "Hold on to yourself," Victoria's voice echoed through dimensions. "Focus on who you are, what anchors you to your reality." Marco thought of the Mary's Grace, of dawn patrols and lobster traps, of the simple rhythms of his former life. The quantum chaos receded slightly. Approaching the gate chamber, Sarah reported through a radio that somehow still worked across. "In quantum space, but we've got company. Mills is accessing the Nazi mainframe. She's—" "Oh God. What is it?" Marco managed, his voice distorting through probability waves. "She's not trying to open the gate. She's trying to break it. The quantum stress would shatter every seal," Victoria finished grimly. "Not just here, at every gate site on Earth, Antarctica, Babylon, Atlantis, all of them failing at once. They emerged from quantum space into a circular chamber that hurt the eyes to look at. Ancient Nazi equipment lined the walls, but it had been transformed by contact with architect technology. Crystalline growth sprouted from control panels. Mathematical equations wrote themselves in light across curved surfaces, and at the chamber's center, Suspended in a column of quantum energy hung the sapphire necklace. "Multiple contacts converging," Sarah warned. "Phillips's team is through the last barrier. Mills's people are phasing through the upper levels. You've got maybe 2 minutes." Marco swam toward the necklace, fighting against currents of probability. "How do we seal the gate?" "The necklace contains the original quantum key," Victoria explained, her form flickering between human and geometric abstract. "Combined with the codes in my case, we can—" The chamber's main door exploded inward. Phillips and his tactical team poured through, weapons ready. Simultaneously, Mills and her phase-shifted operators emerged from the walls like ghosts. "Don't move," Phillips ordered, training his quantum-modified rifle on Marco. "Step away from the containment field." "You're making a mistake," Victoria's voice echoed from everywhere at once. "What's awakening down there? They're not what you think." "On the contrary," Mills smiled coldly, checking readings on her tablet. "They're exactly what we think. Beings of pure quantum potential, the next stage of evolution." "No," Victoria's form solidified, becoming almost human. "They're what happens when evolution goes wrong, when the hunger for power consumes everything else." She looked at Marco. "That's why I chose to stay, to warn humanity. To try to stop this." Phillips laughed. "Stop progress? Stop the greatest technological revolution in human history? Stop the end of everything human," Victoria countered. "They don't want to uplift you, they want to consume you. Add your quantum potential to theirs. They're not gods anymore, they're parasites." The base shuddered. Deep beneath them, something vast was stirring. Sarah's voice crackled through the radio. "Failsafe is armed. 7 minutes to detonation. But Marco, the quantum readings, they're unlike anything we've seen. Whatever's down there, it's already." Partly awake, Mills stepped forward, her phase shifter humming. "Dr. Drake, or whatever you really are, the time for warnings is over. Humanity is ready to ascend." "No," Victoria said softly. "You're ready to be devoured." Marco felt the quantum chip in his boot pulse once. Victoria's voice whispered in his mind, "The necklace, the case, both contain fragments of the original quantum locks. But there's a third piece, the one I gave you. Once a quantum being chooses to limit itself, to become human, that choice has power." He understood suddenly. Victoria hadn't just chosen humanity. She'd encoded that choice into quantum mathematics, created a key from the one thing her former people could never understand. The power of choosing to be less than a god. Mills was still talking, outlining her vision of a quantum-ascended humanity. Phillips was moving his team into position around the containment field. Neither of them saw Marco's hand slip into his boot. "Sarah," he subvocalized into his radio, "when I say now, trigger the fail-safe." "That'll kill us all," she protested. "Trust me." He glanced at Victoria's quantum form. "Sometimes the only way forward is straight through the storm." The chip felt warm in his hand, pulsing with Victoria's choice, her sacrifice, her humanity. Above them, the Nazi base groaned as reality bent under the pressure of what was awakening. Below, time to roll the dice, time to trust, time to see if humanity's greatest weakness, its limitations, could become its greatest strength. Marco Romano, simple fisherman from Port Haven, prepared to gamble everything on a quantum being's choice to become human. Marco's world exploded into quantum chaos. One moment, he was reaching for the necklace in its containment field. The next, Victoria's power surged through the chamber like a tidal wave of mathematics, scattering Mills's phase-shifted operators across multiple probability states. "Now!" Victoria's voice rang through dimensions as Marco's hand closed around the sapphire necklace. The quantum chip in his other hand blazed with impossible light, resonating with both the necklace and the case still bound to Victoria's wrist. 3 pieces of the same quantum lock, finally reunited. "Stop them!" Mills screamed, but her people were struggling to maintain corporeal form as reality buckled around them. Phillips's team opened fire, but their quantum-modified weapons only added to the chaos. Each bullet split into probability clouds, turning the water into a maze of lethal potential. "The gate!" Sarah's voice crackled through static. "It's starting to—" The chamber's floor shattered, revealing a crystalline chasm that stretched down into geometric impossibility. And from that chasm rose something that existed in more dimensions than the human mind could process. Marco caught fragmentary impressions, angles that violated physics, mathematics made manifest, hunger older than time itself. The architects in their corrupted form, reaching through quantum space with appendages of pure probability. "The locks!" Victoria called. "Marco, we need all three pieces aligned." He kicked hard against a current of quantum flux, fighting his way toward her flickering form. The necklace pulsed in one hand, the chip in the other, reaching for the case that contained the final piece of the puzzle. Mills's phase shifter screamed as she pushed it beyond safe limits, trying to reach them. Through the quantum storm. "You can't stop evolution. You can't stop ascension." "Watch us," Marco growled. Victoria's human form solidified one final time as Marco reached her. Their eyes met across the chaos of broken reality. "Ready to do something monumentally stupid?" she asked. "With you? Always." They brought the three quantum keys together just as the first architect breached the gate. Reality trembled as an entity that had once shaped galaxies pulled itself into their dimension, its hunger radiating across quantum space like a cold sun. "Sarah!" Marco shouted into his radio. "Hit the failsafe! Now!" "But trust me!" The Nazi base's emergency systems activated with German precision. Quantum-enhanced explosives began their countdown, designed to create a dead zone that would seal this gate forever. But Marco and Victoria had something the Nazis hadn't: a quantum key born from the choice to embrace limitation, to choose humanity over godhood. The necklace, the case, and the chip rang together like crystal bells as their quantum signatures aligned. Victoria's voice took on harmonics that shook the water itself. "By the power of our own choosing, by the strength found in accepting limits, by the beauty of what it means to be human, we seal this gate." The architect's vast form writhed as the quantum keys resonated with something fundamental to reality itself. Not just mathematics, not just physics, but choice, free will, the power to be less than what you could be, and to find strength in that decision. Mills screamed in rage as her phase shifter overloaded, her dreams of ascension shattering like glass. Phillips and his team were already retreating, survival instinct overriding orders. The quantum key's power built to impossible levels. Marco felt Victoria's hand find his, solid and human and real, as they held the keys together against the tide of broken probability. "Sarah!" he gasped into his radio. "Tell me that failsafe is ready. 20 seconds!" The architect towered over them, its form hurting the mind, its hunger pulling at the quantum potential in every atom of their beings. Ancient and vast, and so very, very angry at what it had become. "I'm sorry," Victoria whispered, and Marco realized she was speaking to her former people. "I'm sorry you forgot how to be real." The quantum keys blazed one final time. Reality bent, buckled, and chose. The gate began to close. The architect's scream echoed across dimensions as it was pulled back into its prison. Mills's phase-shifted operators snapped back into normal space-time, their quantum tech burning out, and through it all, Marco held onto Victoria's hand, anchoring, her choice to remain human with his own quantum-touched existence. 5 seconds to fail safe, Sarah warned. Marco looked at Victoria, saw everything she had given up, everything she had chosen, shining in her eyes. "Still trust me?" she asked. He smiled. Through the storm, the failsafe detonated and the world went quantum white. The failsafe's quantum detonation rippled outward like a stone dropped in the pool of reality itself. Marco felt physics trying to reassert itself, fighting against the broken probabilities that filled the gate chamber. Through the chaos, he kept his grip on Victoria's hand, their quantum-touched existences resonating together. The gate's not fully closed. Sarah's voice cut through static. The fail-safe, it's not enough. She was right. Despite the Nazi device's power, despite the quantum key's resonance, the gate remained open a fraction. Through that crystalline crack, the architect's vast form was still trying to force its way through, its hunger fighting against the laws of reality themselves. "Victoria!" Jonathan Drake's voice suddenly filled the chamber, broadcast through quantum space itself. "The final failsafe, the one we built into your core programming." Victoria's hand tightened on Marco's. "No," she said, "there has to be another way. There isn't. You know what has to be done." Marco looked at her face, saw the decision there. "Victoria, what's he talking about? Why do you think I chose to become human?" she asked softly. "Not just to warn humanity, to become a weapon. My quantum signature, transformed by 20 years of human experience, it's poison to them now. If I let go completely, stop holding back the change, you'll die." Marco realized. This form will, this self, but the choice I made that will ripple across quantum space, show them what they've lost, what they could choose to become again. The architect's vast form twisted through geometries that shouldn't exist, its hunger growing more desperate as it sensed what was coming. Mills lay unconscious, her phase shifter a burnt ruin. Phillips and his team had retreated to safer distances. "Sarah," Marco called into his radio, "can you trigger the failsafe again? No power left. We've got maybe 2 minutes before the base's structural integrity fails completely." Victoria touched Marco's face with her free hand. "Thank you," she said, "for showing me why humanity is worth saving, why being finite and limited and real is better than godhood." "There has to be another way," he insisted. She smiled, and in that smile was everything she had learned about being human. Sometimes the only way is through the storm. Before he could stop her, she let go of his hand and stepped into the gate's quantum field. Her form began to blur, human and architect geometries, overlapping as she surrendered to the transformation she had been fighting for 20 years. "No!" Marco tried to reach her, but the quantum energies held him back. "The necklace," she called, her voice taking on impossible harmonics. "The case. Use them to seal the gate behind me. Sarah knows the codes." The architect sensed what she had become and tried to retreat, but it was too late. Victoria's quantum signature, transformed by human experience, human choice, human love, blazed through dimensions like a virus in the mathematical flesh of reality. "Victoria!" Marco shouted. For a moment, just a moment, her human form solidified one last time. "I learned so much from you all," she said. "How to feel, how to care, how to love. Now I can teach them." She stepped through the gate. There was a sound like crystal bells, shattering across every quantum frequency at once. The architect's vast form convulsed as Victoria's transformed signature began to spread through the quantum network that connected all of their kind. "Now, Marco," Sarah called. "The keys!" Moving on instinct, Marco slammed the necklace and case together. Sarah fed him the codes through his radio, and he spoke them into the quantum storm. Ancient locks engaged. Reality began to heal itself. The gate started to close for the final time. Through it, Marco caught one last glimpse of Victoria as she brought humanity's most powerful gift, the ability to choose limitation, to choose love, to choose reality over power, to the beings who had forgotten how to be anything but hungry gods. "Seal it," Drake commanded, "before—" The gate slammed shut with a sound like the end of everything. Quantum energy exploded outward, then imploded, then simply normalized. Physics reasserted itself. The water became just water again. The Nazi base groaned as ordinary structural forces returned. Marco floated in the suddenly normal sea, holding the now dormant necklace and case. His quantum-touched mind slowly settled back into human patterns, though he knew he would never see reality quite the same way again. Sarah's voice came through his radio, normal static replacing quantum harmonics. Base is flooding. We need to move. Now, he took one last look at where the gate had been. Somewhere beyond normal space-time, Victoria was teaching gods how to be real again. It wasn't the ending he had expected when he pulled a drowning woman from a storm. But then, the best stories never end quite the way you think they will. "Coming," he said, and turned away from impossibility to deal with the merely improbable task of getting them all out alive. The Mary's Grace broke the surface into a world transformed. Where the crystalline structure had towered, there was only calm sea. The quantum distortions had faded, leaving behind a perfect late summer morning and a handful of people forever, changed by what they had witnessed. Marco helped Sarah onto the deck, both of them soaked and exhausted. Mills and her surviving operators were already in custody. A Coast Guard cutter had responded to the unauthorized diving operation, its crew unknowingly arriving just in time to arrest would-be gods. "Mr. Romano," Jonathan Drake's voice, came from the boat's radio, human and tired and full of grief. "The President has been briefed. You'll be receiving some visitors shortly. They'll have paperwork for you to sign." "Classified?" "Very. Though they're also bringing a presidential pardon for any laws we may have broken today. And," Drake paused, "thank you for being there with her at the end, for helping her complete what she chose to become." Marco looked out at the peaceful water, remembering Victoria's final smile. "She taught us as much as we taught her." Above them, the storm clouds had completely cleared. Sometimes the only way through was straight ahead. And sometimes the most human thing you could do was choose to be exactly what you were. Nothing more and nothing less. Marco Romano, simple fisherman from Port Haven, turned his boat toward home. 3 months later, Marco stood at the helm of a new research vessel, the quantum-enhanced instruments on his console monitoring the deep in ways no human technology had managed before. The joint venture contract with Drake Industries had transformed the Mary's Grace into something between a fishing boat and a quantum research platform. Sarah worked beside him, dividing her time between the town clinic and studying the medical applications of stabilized quantum technology. The research facility Drake had built in Port Haven employed half the town now, turning the quiet fishing village into a hub for studying safer ways to understand the universe's deeper nature. "Another signal," Sarah reported, studying readings that would have seemed impossible just months ago. Like she promised. "More coordinates." Marco nodded. Victoria's final gift kept arriving. Quantum coordinates marking other gates that needed securing, other places where reality had grown thin. But unlike Mills's dream of forced ascension, these coordinates came with something else. Mathematical proofs showing how humanity could grow safely into its own potential, one careful step at a time. "She's still teaching," he said softly, "both us and them." The sea sparkled beneath the autumn sun, its depths holding mysteries that would unfold in their own time, on their own schedule. The human way. 1 year to the day after the storm, Marco sat in his favorite diner, looking at a family photo that would have seemed impossible before. Sarah, Drake, and 24 local researchers gathered around the Mary's Grace, celebrating their latest breakthrough in stable quantum technology. The sapphire necklace, now transformed into a monitoring device, hung safely in the research center's vault. But his eyes kept returning to the quantum shimmer that appeared in every photo they took, a familiar female form, smiling, watching over the humans who had taught her how to be real. Some choices, it seemed, echoed forever across reality itself. Dawn painted Port Haven gold as the Mary's Grace headed out to sea. Marco still checked his lobster traps each morning. Some habits were worth keeping. The quantum sensors hummed, softly, monitoring deeper waters for ancient signals. He smiled, remembering a storm, a rescue, and a choice that had changed everything. Sometimes the simplest acts contained the greatest power. Sometimes being human was the grandest adventure of all.